Story 1. He killed my teachers. I never could have imagined that an ordinary day at school would turn into the worst day of my life. It started off like any other day. I was running a bit late and feeling a bit groggy from staying up late the night before. As I arrived at school, I greeted my friends and settled into my first class, not suspecting that chaos and terror were about to erupt. After lunch, we were all in the hall, waiting for our next lesson, when suddenly, the lockdown alarm blared through the school. Panic ensued, and students started running in all directions. A teacher rushed by and pulled me into a nearby classroom with 10 other students. The teacher locked the door and instructed us to hide under the desks. We sat there in silence, fear gripping our hearts as we listened to the faint footsteps outside the classroom. The seconds felt like hours as we waited, not knowing what was happening in the rest of the school. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door next to our classroom, causing me to jump in terror. The teacher motioned for us to stay quiet, and we held our breaths, praying that whoever was outside would leave. Then, there was a knock on our door, and a desperate voice of a boy pleaded to be let in, claiming that someone was after him. The teacher hesitated, torn between compassion and the strict lockdown protocols. We were all paralyzed with fear, unsure of what to do. The footsteps outside the door grew fainter, and the boy's voice eventually faded away. We stayed huddled under the desks, straining to hear any sign of danger. The minutes stretched on, and the silence was deafening. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, echoing through the school halls. It sounded like it was coming from upstairs, right above us. My heart pounded in my chest as we all exchanged horrified glances, praying that the nightmare would end. Minutes passed, feeling like an eternity, until another scream rang out, filling the school with terror once more. The fear in the room was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in grave danger. The long moments of silence that followed were almost worse than the screams. We were all on edge, waiting for any sign of what was happening outside our hiding place. The teacher, clearly distressed, kept a watchful eye on the door, ready to protect us at all costs. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we heard another knock on the door. This time it was a male voice, claiming to be from the police. He assured us that the boy responsible for the chaos had been arrested and that we were safe. Relief washed over us, and the teacher cautiously opened the door. It was indeed the police, and they quickly ushered us out of the classroom to safety. As we made our way through the school, the true horror of what had happened began to reveal itself. We learned that an 18-year-old student named Fabian had attacked 2 teachers, Miss Jane and Miss Laura, with an axe. The brutality of his actions left us all in shock. Miss Jane had been helpless, lying on the floor, severely injured but still alive when he repeatedly struck her with the axe. Miss Laura, hearing the screams, had rushed to help, but tragically met the same fate. The police had acted swiftly and managed to apprehend the boy before any more harm could be done. As the reality of the situation settled in, I felt a mix of relief and grief. I was grateful to be safe, but the horror of witnessing such violence and the loss of 2 beloved teachers weighed heavily on my soul. The school was now a crime scene, and the authorities worked tirelessly to investigate the horrifying events that had unfolded. Fabian was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison for his heinous crimes. In the days that followed, the school community grieved the loss of Miss Jane and Miss Laura, 2 caring and dedicated educators who had touched the lives of so many students. The sense of safety we had once taken for granted was shattered, replaced by a lingering sense of vulnerability. The incident left a lasting impact on all of us, and it would take time for the wounds to heal. We rallied together as a community, supporting each other through the trauma and finding strength in our shared experiences. The school implemented additional security measures to ensure the safety of the students and staff, but the memory of that terrifying day would never fade. We were forever changed by the events of that ordinary day, turned nightmare, and the scars would remain with us for the rest of our lives.
Story 2. The Obsession. My name is Jenny, and for the past few months, my life has become a nightmare. There's this boy in my school named Jacob, and he's been obsessed with me for as long as I can remember. He's always been creepy and weird, and I've caught him taking pictures of me on multiple occasions. I told the principal about it, but he did nothing more than talk to Jacob, which only seemed to make things worse. As the weeks went by, things got weirder and weirder. Jacob would follow me around, always lurking in the shadows, watching my every move. His eyes bore into me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was constantly being watched. One day, he mustered up the courage to approach me. With a twisted smile on his face, he told me that he was deeply in love with me. My heart sank, and I rejected him firmly, telling him to stop following me, or I would tell my parents and the authorities about his behavior. The next day, Jacob was absent from school, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe he had finally taken my warning seriously. I went about my day, trying to push thoughts of him out of my mind, feeling hopeful that I could finally feel safe again. At lunch break, however, all hell broke loose. Gunshots echoed through the school, and panic ensued. The principal's voice came over the speakers, announcing a code red lockdown. Fear engulfed me as I joined the stampede of students rushing to find shelter. I needed to get away from the chaos, so I ran to the nearest bathroom and locked myself inside. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I tried to call my parents, but the signal was jammed. In the bathroom, I sat on the toilet, huddled in fear, and prayed for the nightmare to end. 5 minutes felt like an eternity, and when the noise of running and screaming outside finally stopped, an eerie silence settled in. I could hear my own ragged breathing as I hid there, trying to be as quiet as possible. Then I heard a voice calling out, "Jenny, you can't hide forever. I need to talk to you." My blood ran cold, and tears streamed down my face as I realized it was Jacob. I knew I had to stay quiet, but every fiber of my being wanted to scream for help. The footsteps drew closer, and then there was banging on the bathroom door. I couldn't hold back my sobs, terrified that he would find me. As if the situation couldn't get any worse, my phone started ringing. The sound echoed in the small bathroom, and I quickly turned it off, but it was too late. Jacob knew I was in there. He taunted me, saying he knew I was scared and that he wouldn't leave until we talked. The handle of the bathroom door shook violently as he tried to force his way in. I screamed for help, hoping that anyone would come to my rescue. But there was only silence outside, and I felt completely alone and trapped. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps finally receded, and I heard Jacob's voice fading away. The relief was short-lived, as I knew he would come back if he didn't find me elsewhere. I stayed in the bathroom, paralyzed with fear, unsure of what to do next. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and I was on the verge of breaking down completely when the principal's voice came over the speakers again. He said that the police had arrived, and that the school was safe. With a surge of adrenaline, I ran out of the bathroom and joined the other students at the designated meeting point. The relief of knowing that help had arrived was overwhelming, but I was still trembling with fear. As the police arrested Jacob, I couldn't help but wonder how far his obsession with me would have gone if the lockdown hadn't happened. I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if he had found me. The police took statements from witnesses, and I recounted everything that had happened, from Jacob's stalking to the terrifying moments in the bathroom. It was a traumatic experience that would stay with me forever. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even when I was safe at home. The nightmares haunted my sleep, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that Jacob might come back. The school implemented stricter security measures, but the scars of that day were deep. I sought counseling to help me cope with the trauma, and my parents did everything they could to support me through the difficult time. Jacob was charged and taken into custody, and I felt a mix of relief and fear. I knew he would be locked away, but I couldn't help but worry that he might someday come back for me.
Story 3: The Gunshots. I never imagined that an ordinary day at school would turn into a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my life. My name is Alex, and I was just an average high school student trying to get through the day. But one fateful afternoon, everything changed. It started as a normal school day, with classes, laughter, and the usual chatter among students. But as the day wore on, the atmosphere in the school became tense. Rumors spread like wildfire, and whispers of a possible threat on campus reached our ears. During lunch break, my friends Mark and Emily and I noticed that some students were leaving the cafeteria in a hurry. Something was definitely amiss, but we couldn't put our finger on it. As we finished our lunch, we saw teachers and staff rushing through the hallways, their faces filled with concern. Curiosity and worry got the better of us, and we decided to investigate. We made our way to the rooftop, hoping to get a better view of what was happening around the school. Climbing up the narrow staircase, we were filled with a sense of unease. As we reached the rooftop, our worst fears were confirmed. We could see students and teachers evacuating the school grounds, guided by faculty members who were doing their best to keep everyone safe. The principal's voice echoed over the speakers, instructing everyone to stay calm and follow the lockdown protocols. The panic was evident, and we knew we had to stay hidden to avoid drawing attention to ourselves. We huddled behind the large water tanks, our hearts pounding in our chests. Our eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding before us. It felt like an eternity as we waited, hidden from view and unsure of what was happening below. We held on to each other for support, our minds racing with questions and fear. The sound of sirens filled the air, and I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberated through the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunshots. My blood ran cold, and my heart skipped a beat. It was hard to comprehend what was happening. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening at our school. Mark, Emily, and I looked at each other in disbelief, our faces pale with shock. Our instincts told us to run, to escape the danger, but we knew that staying hidden was our only chance of survival. The rooftop seemed like the safest place, but the constant sound of gunfire reminded us of the danger that lurked below. Minutes felt like hours as we clung to the rooftop, each gunshot sending shivers down our spines. We couldn't help but wonder who could do such a thing, who could bring violence and terror to our school. As we waited in silence, we noticed a group of students huddled together on the ground below, trying to find safety near the school gates. Our hearts went out to them, and we felt a sense of helplessness knowing that we couldn't do anything to protect them. Amid the chaos, we heard the voice of a teacher shouting, instructing everyone to get down and take cover. It was clear that the school staff was doing everything they could to keep us safe, and we clung to the hope that help would arrive soon. But as the minutes turned into what felt like an eternity, the sound of gunfire slowly began to fade. We held our breath, unsure if the danger had truly passed. The rooftop provided us with some safety, but it also made us feel isolated and cut off from the rest of the world. Finally, the principal's voice came over the speakers again, announcing that the lockdown was over and that the threat had been neutralized. Relief washed over us, but it was quickly replaced with grief as we realized the extent of the tragedy that had unfolded below. As we made our way back to the ground floor, we saw the devastation that the shooting had caused. Paramedics rushed past us, attending to the injured, and police officers secured the area. The sight of blood-stained hallways and terrified faces will forever be etched in my memory. The impact of that day will stay with me forever. It changed my perspective on life, reminding me of the fragility of human existence and the importance of cherishing every moment. I couldn't help but think about the students who lost their lives, the families who were left devastated, and the brave staff members who put their lives on the line to protect us.
Story 4. The Knife Fight. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest as I ran through the dimly lit hallways of the school. It was supposed to be a normal day, but the atmosphere had shifted, and fear hung heavy in the air. The lockdown alarm blared through the speakers, and chaos erupted as students and teachers scrambled for safety. I had been in the library when it happened, engrossed in my book until the loudspeaker interrupted the stillness. Panic set in, and I followed the crowd of students seeking refuge from whatever danger lurked outside. But as I made my way through the maze of hallways, I noticed a figure trailing behind me, moving with stealth and purpose. I couldn't see his face, but I knew who he was. It was Jason, a boy from my class who had always been quiet and strange. I had sensed something off about him before, but now his presence filled me with dread. I tried to shake off the feeling and focused on finding a place to hide. I ducked into an empty classroom, my heart pounding loudly in my ears. I crouched behind a desk, hoping he hadn't seen me. But the footsteps outside grew closer, and I held my breath, praying he would pass by. Seconds felt like hours as I waited, my eyes fixed on the door. But to my horror, the handle slowly turned, and the door creaked open. I saw his silhouette, and my heart skipped a beat. He stepped into the room, and I knew he had found me. Fear consumed me, and I knew I had to move. I darted out of the classroom and into the adjacent hallway, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. But Jason was relentless, and he pursued me with a determination that sent shivers down my spine. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. I needed to find help, to escape from this nightmare. The adrenaline pumped through my veins as I ran, my breaths coming out in ragged gasps. I found myself in the school's art room, and I quickly locked the door behind me. My hands trembled as I searched for something, anything, to defend myself. My eyes fell on a paintbrush, and I gripped it tightly in my hand, knowing it was a feeble defense against the knife Jason held. I heard him pounding on the door, his voice low and chilling. Come out wherever you are," he taunted. Panic surged through me, and I knew I couldn't stay in the art room forever. I made a split-second decision and slipped out of the room, trying to make my way to the school's main entrance. But Jason was fast, and he was right on my heels. He lunged at me, and I narrowly dodged his knife. My heart raced, and I knew I had to keep moving. I ran through the hallways trying to find any way out. The school felt like a maze, and I felt like a trapped animal desperate to escape. I finally reached the main entrance, but to my horror, it was locked. Tears stung my eyes, and I could feel Jason closing in on me. I knew I couldn't outrun him forever. I made a split-second decision and headed for the stairwell. Maybe I could find another way out through the back of the school. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached the 2nd floor, and as I turned the corner, I came face to face with Jason. He had a sinister smile on his face, and his eyes were filled with a chilling madness. I took a step back, my hands trembling, and tried to reason with him. "Please, Jason, don't do this," I pleaded, but he only laughed in response. "You are going to be the first one," he sneered, raising the knife. I knew I had to act fast. With a surge of adrenaline, I swung the paintbrush at him with all my strength. It caught him off guard, and he stumbled back, dropping the knife. I didn't waste a second and bolted past him, taking the stairs to the ground floor. I burst through the emergency exit, feeling the cool air hit my face. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, not looking back. The school's campus stretched out before me, and I ran toward the distant lights of a nearby neighborhood. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station where I called my parents. They arrived within minutes, and I told them everything. They said that the police were already at the school, and to my immense relief, they found Jason hiding in a classroom. He was arrested and taken away. As the sun began to rise, I sat on a bench outside the gas station, my heart still racing. The nightmare was finally over, but the fear and trauma would stay with me for a long time. The school lockdown had turned into a terrifying ordeal, and I knew I would never be the same again. But I also knew that I was lucky to be alive. I had survived the unthinkable, and I would carry the strength of that survival with me always.
Story 1. He was hiding in the lake. This is the story of why I'm never going camping again, and why you shouldn't either. I still have nightmares about that face in the lake. As the sun began its descent, casting a golden glow over the forest, my group of friends and I, Charlie, Lucas, and Emma, were brimming with excitement as we embarked on our long-awaited camping trip. The anticipation of adventure and camaraderie filled the air as we hiked through the wilderness, our backpacks laden with supplies and hearts filled with joy. After an hour of traversing through the dense foliage, we stumbled upon a hidden gem, a picturesque lake nestled amidst the towering trees. The sight before us took our breath away, and without a second thought, we decided this was the perfect spot to set up camp for the weekend. Under the canopy of stars, we pitched our tents and gathered around the campfire. Laughter and banter echoed through the woods as we shared stories and indulged in marshmallow roasting. It felt like we were in our own little world, far away from the troubles of everyday life. As the night wore on, the warmth of the campfire provided comfort, but there was a lingering feeling of something amiss. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the eerie ambiance that nighttime in the wilderness can sometimes bring. Yet, the unease persisted, and as I dipped my toes into the lake to cool off, an unexpected smell assaulted my senses. It was foul, and I couldn't quite put my finger on its origin, but I dismissed it, thinking it must be some natural occurrence in this secluded paradise. However, the sense of disquietude only grew stronger when I heard an odd noise emanating from my left. My curiosity piqued. I cautiously investigated the source but found nothing unusual. In an attempt not to alarm my friends, I decided to keep the oddity to myself. As midnight approached, we decided it was time to retreat to our tents and surrender to the embrace of sleep. I crawled into my cozy cocoon, hoping the tranquility of the surroundings would lull me into a peaceful slumber. But as the night wore on, every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind seemed amplified, preventing me from slipping into a restful state. At the stroke of 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a shadowy figure silhouetted against the glow of the campfire. I assumed it must be one of my friends, unable to sleep as well, so I bravely ventured outside my tent to join them. To my bewilderment, there was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest, and a chill ran down my spine. Confusion and fear coiled within me as I tried to comprehend what had just occurred. It was as if the forest itself was playing tricks on me, messing with my sense of reality. Then a sudden splash broke the silence coming from the lake. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and a shiver of trepidation shot down my spine. Fear now coursed through my veins, but I resisted the urge to flee back to my tent. Summoning my courage, I reached for my flashlight and crept down to the water's edge. The night was draped in darkness, and I scanned the area with my beam of light. My heart pounded loudly in my ears, drowning out every other sound. And then, I saw it. In the left corner of the lake, the light revealed a face, a ghastly visage adorned with a sinister grin. My blood turned to ice, and I could feel a scream building up in my throat. But before it could escape, I turned and sprinted back to my friends, terror urging me on. Upon returning to the safety of the campsite, I relayed what I had seen to my friends, and their expressions turned from amusement to concern. Although skeptical at first, my own sheer panic and distress convinced them that something was seriously wrong. In a frantic frenzy, we packed up our gear and fled the lake, never once looking back. Panic-induced adrenaline propelled us forward, our only desire to escape the darkness that had descended upon us. As we finally reached the safety of our car, we managed to contact the police. We conveyed every chilling detail, but even as we did so, the surrealism of the situation lingered. How could something so sinister happen in such a serene setting? The police acted swiftly, and a search party was dispatched to the lake. It was as if the forest itself held its breath in anticipation of what would be uncovered. Yet, as the investigation unfolded, it yielded only unsettling clues. Bloodstains on leaves and traces in the water, but no concrete answers. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to a woman, but the figure I saw in the lake was undoubtedly a male. In the weeks that followed, news spread like wildfire. The police had uncovered a trail of disappearances and unsolved cases spanning several years. Speculation circulated, and rumors painted the lake as a cursed place, haunted by the souls of those who had vanished without a trace. Story 2. The Woods Massacre. My name is Joseph, and I'm a 21-year-old who loves the outdoors. I'm an avid hiker and camper, so when my friend suggested a camping trip for the weekend, I was thrilled. We were all excited about the prospect of a peaceful getaway, but little did we know that our adventure would be anything but tranquil. As we arrived at the chosen spot near the serene river, the golden hues of the setting sun painted the landscape in a mesmerizing glow. We started setting up camp, laughter and excitement filling the air. However, that joy was short-lived when a peculiar event unfolded. Amidst the rustling leaves and gentle breeze, a branch snapped somewhere in the dense woods surrounding us. The sudden sound caught our attention, and a strange sensation washed over us. We exchanged uneasy glances, acknowledging that it felt as if something was lurking in the shadows, observing our every move. Attempting to brush off the unease, we continued with the preparations. As we gathered around the campfire, our faces illuminated by its warm glow, we heard another strange sound. This time, a loud thump coming from just outside our tent. We instinctively grabbed our flashlights and cautiously stepped outside, only to catch a fleeting glimpse of a figure darting away into the dark night. Fear began to creep into our hearts, and the once exciting camping trip was now clouded with uncertainty. Retreating back into the safety of our tent, we huddled together, trying to rationalize what was happening around us. Yet the unsettling noises persisted throughout the night, with occasional loud screams echoing through the wilderness. We could neither fathom the source nor muster the courage to investigate further. Instead, we clung to each other, seeking solace in our shared fear. As morning dawned, we decided to cut our camping trip short and head home. The unnerving events of the previous night were still fresh in our minds, but little did we know that the horrors had only just begun. While driving back, we came across an old man whose car was stranded in the middle of the road. His face was contorted with terror, and he spoke of a chilling encounter in the very same woods we had camped in. The old man recounted seeing a large, shadowy figure lurking amidst the trees. Its gaze fixated on him with malevolence. Filled with dread, he had fled the area as quickly as he could, leaving behind his peaceful camping spot turned into a haunting realm of fear. The uneasy glances we exchanged told us that we couldn't dismiss his words as mere coincidence. Our hearts pounded with trepidation as we quickly packed up our belongings, eager to leave that ominous place behind. The unsettling encounter with the old man left us unsettled and haunted by an inexplicable sense of danger. In the days that followed, chilling news emerged, painting a grim picture of the dark forces lurking in the woods we had once hoped to find solace in. The police discovered the lifeless bodies of a family, a couple and their 2 young children, near the very location we had camped in. The realization struck us with terror. Our camping trip had unknowingly intertwined with a heinous crime scene. It became evident that the ominous figure glimpsed by the old man was none other than the merciless killer responsible for these tragic murders. Our hearts sank, and we felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude that we had escaped with our lives. The horror of what we had unknowingly encountered haunted our thoughts, and the screams of terror we heard that night lingered in our minds like a relentless echo.
Story 3. Something took my boyfriend. My name is Jessica, and I couldn't have been more excited about the camping trip with my boyfriend Leo. The beautiful wilderness, the crackling campfire, and the starry night sky all promised a romantic and memorable weekend. Little did I know that this adventure would quickly turn into a terrifying nightmare. As the sun set on the horizon, Leo and I sat by the campfire, wrapped in each other's warmth. The woods around us were alive with the sounds of nature, and we laughed and shared stories late into the night. However, amidst our laughter and joy, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow darting behind a tree. "Leo, did you see that?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. Leo turned to look in the direction I pointed, his face serene. "Oh, it's probably just a fox or some small critter," he reassured me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My instincts told me there was more to it than just a curious fox. I suggested we call it a night and head to the tent, but Leo was enamored by the beauty of the night sky. He insisted on staying by the campfire to stargaze for a while longer. Reluctantly, I made my way to the tent, zipping it up tightly to keep pesky mosquitoes at bay. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, unable to shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at the back of my mind. My anxiety reached its peak when I realized that Leo hadn't returned to the tent. I checked my phone. It was 2 a.m. Leo was still not beside me. Trying to convince myself that he had simply gone out to relieve himself, I closed my eyes, hoping to find solace in sleep. But then, a noise jolted me awake. My heart pounded in my chest, and I couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. "Leo, is that you?" I called out, trying to steady my voice. The footsteps outside ceased immediately, plunging the surroundings into an eerie silence. Fear began to overtake my senses, but I reasoned that Leo must be responsible for the noise, that there was a logical explanation. Yet, as time passed, and he failed to return, panic set in. Outside the tent, a dark silhouette emerged, standing motionless. I could feel its gaze on me, penetrating through the thin fabric of the tent. Frozen in terror, I mustered the courage to unzip the tent and flee from whatever lurked beyond. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I ran as fast as my legs would carry me, not daring to look back. My only thought was to reach help, to escape the sinister presence that had invaded our peaceful retreat. Finally, I reached a road, and with trembling hands, I dialed 911, desperately pleading for assistance. The dispatcher reassured me that help was on the way, and I clung to that promise like a lifeline. The police arrived, and I frantically recounted the horrifying events of the night. Together, we returned to the campsite, and I called out for Leo, praying for a response. But there was silence. No trace of him anywhere. That's when they discovered footprints leading into the dense woods. The police followed the trail with determination, and soon they found him. Leo, lying on the ground shirtless. Alive but seemingly unaware of what had transpired. With great urgency, they rushed him to the hospital, hoping to find answers and provide him with the medical care he needed. But the mystery only deepened as he regained consciousness. When Leo woke up, he appeared disoriented and confused, unable to recall any details of our camping trip. He didn't remember anything about the shadows, the eerie noises, or even our arrival at the campsite. The police scoured the woods for any evidence that could lead them to the person responsible for the night's horrors, but there were no signs of anyone else being there. The entire ordeal remained shrouded in an enigmatic fog, leaving us with more questions than answers. To this day, the chilling memories of that camping trip haunt me. The sense of danger that lurked just beyond our campfire still sends shivers down my spine. The fear and the unknown have left a lasting impact on both of us. A reminder that even amidst the beauty of nature, darkness can creep in without warning.
Story 4. Vanish Without a Trace. My name is Alex, and I want to tell you about a camping trip that changed my life and the lives of my 4 closest friends forever. It was supposed to be a fun-filled weekend filled with laughter and adventure, but instead it turned into a chilling tale of mystery and loss. My friends and I, Ben, Sarah, Emma, and Mark, decided to go on a camping trip deep into the heart of a remote forest. We were all eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and immerse ourselves in the tranquility of nature. Little did we know that our desire for adventure would lead us down a dark and eerie path. We arrived at the campsite, a picturesque clearing surrounded by ancient trees. The sun was still high in the sky, casting a warm glow over our surroundings. We set up our tents, laughing and joking as we worked together, excited for the weekend ahead. As the evening descended upon us, we gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories from our past. The atmosphere was electric with camaraderie and friendship. We marveled at the beauty of the night sky, the stars twinkling like diamonds. But as the night wore on, a strange unease settled over us. There was something eerie about the silence that enveloped the woods. The usual sounds of nocturnal creatures seemed absent, replaced by an unsettling quiet. As we huddled around the dying campfire, Sarah suddenly exclaimed, "Did you guys hear that?" We all fell silent, straining our ears to listen. A faint rustling sound echoed in the distance, sending shivers down our spines. "It's probably just an animal," Ben said, trying to quell our growing unease. Despite his words, the atmosphere felt charged with tension. We decided it was best to turn in for the night, hoping that a good night's sleep would alleviate our unease. Inside my tent, I lay awake, my mind restless. The night was heavy with an inexplicable sense of foreboding. I wasn't the only one feeling it. I could hear the rustling of sleeping bags and the soft murmurs of my friends nearby. Suddenly, a low moan pierced the stillness, chilling me to the bone. It sounded like a distant cry for help, but I couldn't be sure. "Did anyone else hear that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a collective silence, and then Emma's voice came from the darkness. I thought I heard something too. Fear gripped us as we listened intently for any other sounds. But the forest seemed to hold its breath, concealing whatever secrets it held within its depths. Unable to ignore our growing fear, Mark suggested that we search the area in the morning. We tried to convince ourselves that it was merely an animal or some trick of the wind. But the unease lingered like a ghostly presence. The morning light filtered through the dense foliage, awakening me with a sense of excitement for the day ahead. As I unzipped my tent, I noticed that Ben's tent was still closed. It struck me as odd since he was usually an early riser. I called out to him, "Hey Ben, time to wake up." But there was no response. I walked over to his tent and found it empty. My heart started pounding in my chest as I checked the other tents. There was no sign of Ben anywhere. Panic started to rise within me, and I quickly woke up the others, explaining that Ben was missing. We frantically searched the campsite and the surrounding area, calling his name over and over again. But he was nowhere to be found. As fear and uncertainty gripped us, we decided to call the police for help. They arrived at the campsite and conducted a thorough search of the forest, but they found no trace of Ben or any other person who might have been there. The days turned into weeks, and despite numerous search efforts, there was no sign of our missing friend. The forest seemed to hold its secrets close, refusing to reveal the truth behind Ben's disappearance. We were left with more questions than answers. How could someone vanish without a trace in the middle of the woods? What had happened to our dear friend? As the months passed, we struggled to come to terms with the loss and the unsettling mystery that surrounded it. Our once tight-knit group started to drift apart, each of us haunted by the memories of that fateful camping trip.
Story 1. The Creepy Note. My name's Jasmine, and I was just 19, working the night shift at a gas station last year. And this is the reason why I quit. The words on that note still scare me. It was a regular Sunday night, nothing out of the ordinary. The clock had just struck midnight, and the fog outside made everything look a bit eerie. You see, at that time, the gas station was usually as quiet as a library, with hardly any customers around. I was keeping myself occupied by scrolling through TikTok on my phone, trying to stay awake. Then, out of nowhere, the door creaks open. In walks this guy. He looked normal enough, but there was something about his eyes that gave me the chills. He wandered around the store, glanced at some chips, but didn't buy a thing. Then, he saunters up to the counter, and that's when things start feeling weird. He asks if he can use the bathroom. Now, normally, that wouldn't be a big deal, but there's just something about him that's off. I tell him it's over to the left, and he heads that way. I go back to my phone, figuring it's just another late-night pit stop. But time starts ticking, and this guy isn't coming out. 10 minutes pass, and I'm starting to get uneasy. I mean, what's he doing in there? I call out, "Is everything okay?" No answer. My heart's racing, and I head over to the bathroom to check on him. The wind's howling outside, and all I can think is, this night's taking a turn. I call out again, but still no response. Back at the counter, I'm not sure what to do. Then, there's this noise outside, like a thud. And right after that, footsteps. Now I'm freaked out. But I tell myself, it's just some animal or the wind. But the minutes keep dragging on, and this guy's still in the bathroom. I'm torn between worrying about his safety and fearing for mine. I'm almost ready to grab the bathroom key and open up the door. But when I turn around to grab the key, his face is right there in the small window. I scream, and he's just standing there, grinning that awful grin. Those eerie eyes fixed on me. I drop down behind the counter and hit the button to lock all the doors. My heart's pounding so hard I can barely breathe. I dial 911, my voice shaking as I explain what's happening. But then I hear it, the bathroom door unlocking and creaking open. My whole body goes cold, and I'm cowering, scared out of my wits. I hear footsteps getting closer, and I'm doing everything I can to hold back the tears. But when it sounds like the man is right next to the counter, there's a knock on the door, and the man's footsteps stop. I can't believe my luck. Another customer came to my rescue, unknowingly scaring off whatever nightmare is after me. I am too afraid to move, but after about 5 minutes, the dispatcher tells me the police are here and that I can unlock the doors. I do it as fast as I can, the relief washing over me. The police search the place, every nook and cranny, but they don't find anything. The man must have used the bathroom window to go in and out. when the police checked the bathroom again, they found a small note on the floor saying, "See you soon." I have no idea what this man was planning, but it felt like someone dropped a stone in my stomach. The police offered to give me a ride home, and I don't hesitate. I'm done with that place. They promised to do their best to find the guy, but deep down, I know there's only so much they can do. The next day, I quit that job. I never set foot in that gas station again. And as for the man, well, he vanished into thin air. The whole thing left me with a gut feeling that I'll never shake. A constant reminder that sometimes reality can be scarier than any ghost story.
Story 2. Missing for 6 months. For the past 2 years, I've been working the night shift at a gas station. Over time, I've experienced my fair share of odd occurrences, but nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded during one chilling night. It was around 2 a.m. when things took a disturbing turn that I could never have anticipated. As I manned the station, an air of familiarity surrounded me. The humming of the fluorescent lights, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional rumble of a passing vehicle were the usual sounds that accompanied my late-night shift. I had become accustomed to the quiet solitude of these nighttime hours, even though they sometimes brought eerie feelings. But this particular night was different. 2 individuals entered the store, a man and a woman. The moment they walked in, I was hit by the unmistakable scent of alcohol that clung to them. It was as if the alcohol had seeped into their very being, and it was impossible to ignore. They made a beeline for the alcohol section, where the shelves were stocked with various spirits and beers. Observing them from behind the counter, something struck me as odd. The woman appeared agitated and uneasy, her face marked by anxiety. On the other hand, the man exuded an unnatural calmness that set off alarm bells in my mind. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about the situation. Growing up in a household marked by my father's abusive behavior toward my mother, I learned to recognize the signs of distress in a woman's behavior, and the woman before me was displaying those signs all too clearly. Her eyes darted around the store, avoiding eye contact at all costs. It was as if she was trapped, desperate to get away from something or someone. I continued to watch them as they browsed the shelves, my concern deepening. Suddenly I heard her voice. The woman was saying that she needed to use the bathroom. It was a simple request, but what happened next sent shivers down my spine. The man's demeanor shifted dramatically. From his previously eerie calmness, he now became frantic, almost panicked. His voice grew loud as he vehemently denied her request, his words carrying a sense of urgency that was impossible to ignore. I was torn. Part of me wanted to intervene, to step in and to offer help to the distressed woman. But another part of me hesitated, worried about escalating the situation and putting her in more danger. As they approached the counter, the man's composure returned, and he asked for a pack of cigarettes. I did my best to mask my concern, treating him as any other customer, even though I knew something was very wrong. Finally, they left the store, and a heavy feeling of relief washed over me. My instincts told me that I needed to do something, that this situation was far from normal. I reached for the phone and dialed the police, my voice steady as I described the 2 individuals and their direction of travel. Around 15 minutes later, a police officer arrived at the gas station. He listened carefully as I recounted the events of the night, from the couple's entrance to their odd behavior to the escalating tension. He assured me that they were taking the situation seriously and that they had a car tailing the man's vehicle. His presence brought a sense of reassurance. even though the unease still lingered. After our conversation, the officer left, and I continued to work through the rest of my shift. As dawn broke and the sun began to rise, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. I was eager to head home and finally get some rest. The following day, I turned on the news, hoping for some closure to the unsettling events of the previous night.
Report suspicious activities.
What I saw froze me in my tracks. The man's face was on the screen, a mugshot confirming that he had been apprehended. But it was the backdrop of the image that struck me with a renewed sense of horror. The woman, the one I had seen with him, had been missing for 6 long months. The news report revealed that she was from another state, and the pieces of the puzzle started to come together. The man had been arrested, but the true horror of the situation lay in the details that unfolded. The woman had suffered through unimaginable cruelty and evil. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't shake the feeling of profound sadness for what she must have endured. As the news report continued, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that she had been found alive, anger at the man responsible for her suffering, and a lingering sense of unease at how close I had been to a deeply disturbing situation. Reflecting on that night, I couldn't help but be grateful that I had followed my instincts and taken action. The woman's desperate situation could have easily gone unnoticed, but the events of that night had been a wake-up call. Life can take unexpected turns, and sometimes being vigilant and compassionate can make all the difference.
Story 3. The Gunshots. Working the night shift at a gas station can make you feel pretty alone and uneasy. Let me tell you about one night that I still remember clearly. It was so dark outside that even the moon seemed to be hiding. The quiet of the night made me feel like I was the only one in the world. I was just trying to keep busy, passing the time until my shift ended without anything strange happening. The hours felt long, and the only things around were the bright lights above me. I cleaned the counters, filled the shelves, and checked the security cameras. Anything to keep my mind off the weird feeling creeping in. But then, out of nowhere, something unexpected happened. Around midnight, 2 people walked into the gas station. They looked messy and moved around in a wobbly way. Just seeing them made me feel nervous. They didn't seem okay. It was pretty clear that these 2 weren't in a normal state. They acted like they had drunk too much alcohol or taken something strong. Their walking was wavy, and their words were hard to understand. They went to the area with sodas, and that's when my heart started to race. Their voices got louder and louder, and it felt like the tension was building up. I couldn't help but listen to their talk quietly. It sounded like they were arguing about something. I started feeling anxious because it was clear that things were getting out of control. They seemed like they might do something unpredictable any second. I knew I had to be careful, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something bad was going to happen. It was like a storm was coming, and you could feel the air getting heavy. I felt like I was waiting for something bad to happen, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. All of a sudden, one of the guys stopped arguing and came up to the counter where I was standing. My heart raced even faster as he got closer. He looked at me with intense red eyes. Even though I was scared inside, I tried my best to stay calm as he asked for cigarettes. The other guy disappeared, and then everything got quiet. It felt like the whole place was holding its breath. Just as I was about to give the guy the cigarettes, the other guy started running toward us. It was like all the tension in the air exploded at once. Time seemed to slow down as things got really chaotic. There were loud noises and shouting, and things crashing to the ground. As things went on, it became harder to make sense of what was happening. There were loud bangs, like something hitting hard, and they echoed through the store. I heard about 5 or 6 bangs, and it felt like they were hitting me in the chest. It was a scary sound, and it made me feel really small. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in an ambulance. My head hurt so much, and I was really confused. The lights were bright, and I could hear voices, but it took me a while to understand what was going on. Slowly, I started to understand what had happened. I had been hit with 1 bullet in my chest and passed out. The guy who wanted cigarettes had been hurt really badly. Bullets had hit him, and he didn't make it. It was hard to believe something like that could happen so suddenly. I can't forget that night. It's a memory that stuck with me, and I think about it a lot. It reminds me that danger can come out of nowhere and change everything. I wish I could have done something to stop it, but I can't change what happened. Thinking back, I hope others can learn from my story. I hope they're careful in their own lives and avoid getting into dangerous situations. Life is fragile, and we need to make good choices to stay safe.
Story 4. Can I borrow your phone? It was a cold autumn night when I found myself working alone at the gas station. The clock struck midnight, and the only sounds that could be heard in the empty streets were the occasional gusts of wind. The fluorescent lights in the small store were flickering and casting eerie shadows on the worn-out linoleum floor. The constant hum of the refrigerators filled the air. I tried to keep myself occupied by flipping through a magazine and occasionally looking out the window as the minutes passed by. I felt very lonely due to the lack of company, and the repetitive nature of working the night shift was starting to have a negative impact on me. However, I had no idea that this ordinary night would soon become the most terrifying experience of my life. At around 3 a.m., a car arrived at one of the gas pumps. The headlights lit up the area, showing a man sitting in the driver's seat. There was something about his appearance that gave me chills. He had an unkempt beard and wore a worn-out jacket that seemed odd on this chilly night. His eyes appeared tired and red, and his face showed signs of aging, as if he had experienced a lot of difficulties in life. I put on a smile and went outside to welcome him, but I couldn't shake off a strange feeling of discomfort. He stared at me intensely, his gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. I cleared my throat to ease the tension. "Good evening, sir. How may I help you tonight?" I asked, trying to appear calm. The man's voice was rough and carried a sense of urgency. "I require assistance. My vehicle has broken down a short distance away, and I do not possess a phone. Would it be possible for you to lend me yours?" Despite my initial hesitation, my compassion for someone in need compelled me to hand him my phone. He promptly dialed a number. As he put the phone to his ear, I couldn't help but notice a wicked smile appear on his face. He abruptly ended the call and handed the phone back to me, his expression now harsh and threatening. "Thank you for your help. You've been very kind." I felt a shiver go down my back as he turned and left, vanishing into the darkness. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was very wrong. I checked my phone and saw that he hadn't made a call at all. The screen showed only a sequence of random numbers and symbols, giving the impression that someone had tampered with it. I felt scared when I realized that I had fallen into a trap. Without wasting any time, I went back inside and locked the doors. I brushed it off as just being some weirdo. The gas station seemed to have regained its usual calm after the man's unsettling visit, and I continued my shifts with a bit less apprehension. However, 30 minutes later, as I was ready to leave, I heard a series of faint noises coming from outside. At first, I dismissed it as just the wind or a passing car. But the sounds continued, growing louder and more distinct. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. My heart began to race, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I tiptoed toward the window and cautiously peeked outside. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a shadow moving near the gas pumps. My mind raced, and I realized that those footsteps weren't coming from a passing stranger. They were coming from the man. Panic gripped me as I realized he was back and seemingly lurking around the gas station. The security measures we had put in place suddenly seemed inadequate. Unsure of what to do, I considered calling the police, but a part of me hesitated. What if I was just being paranoid? What if it was all just a coincidence? As the minutes ticked by, the footsteps grew fainter and eventually faded away. I stayed by the window, watching and waiting, my mind swirling with uncertainty. Should I lock up and leave? Should I stay and finish my shift as usual? The decision felt impossible to make, and I was left grappling with my fear and confusion. After deciding to call the police for my own safety, I anxiously waited for their arrival. Finally, after 10 minutes, they showed up. I quickly unlocked the doors and they entered the gas station. I proceeded to explain everything that had occurred that night. The police then conducted a thorough search of the area, and thankfully, I had made the right decision to call them. They discovered the man's car parked just 3 minutes away in the woods. Upon searching the vehicle, they found a rope and a knife. I can't help but dwell on the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't called the police and simply walked home. Thanks for watching the Haunted Sketchbook. Be sure to check out any of the videos on screen right now if you're planning on not sleeping tonight.